I'm going to go ahead and welcome everyone to the first ever Bryan School Sustainability Expo. And I also want to wish everybody a very happy Earth Day. I'm Nancy Hodges, professor and head of the Department of Consumer Apparel and Retail Studies in the Bryan School of Business. I am also the chair of the VF Virtual Collaboratory Task Force for the Bryan School, which we are celebrating today through our exciting sessions that we have put together for the Expo. So for right now, I'm happy to welcome everyone to the Creating Sustainable Problem Solvers Teaching Sustainability in the Business Classroom panel discussion. So in this session, we will hear from Bryan School faculty coming from across a variety of departments who have received funding support from the Virtual Collaboratory to develop teaching projects focused on helping Bryan School students become sustainable problem solvers. But first, there are a few things for the members of the audience to keep in mind during the session. Number one, please keep your video off and your mic on mute. If you have a question at any point in time during the session panel, type it in the chat and we will be able to view it. We hope that you'll use kind and considerate language. And if your question is detailed, we may have to follow up after the session. We don't have time. So about 15 minutes before the end of the session, Maddie Carey, if you want to wave, Maddie Carey, who's with the Office of External Affairs of the Bryan School, she's going to be monitoring the chat. And so she will start to share questions for the Q&A period.
Hi, thanks, Nancy.
Thank you, Maddie. All right, so why don't we go ahead and start by having the panelists introduce themselves and share a little bit about their teaching projects. For the audience, there is a document with all of the panelists' bios and project summaries that is posted in the chat if you want to look at that. So let's get started. Why don't we start with Anne, since you're the first one I see.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. The grant that I received was to develop a sustainable apparel and textile library, specifically to be used for my 300 level class in textile apparel analysis. And I think it's a very exciting project because I was able to purchase a variety of different garments and fabrics to help students understand what's going on in the sustainable realm with regard to apparel and textiles. So just some of the highlights, I was able to purchase things like cactus leather, vegan cactus leather, garments made out of milk byproducts, milk proteins, and even items that are sustainable over a long period of time. For example, a buggy blanket made out of mohair from 1910. So we're looking at sustainability from a lot of different aspects. So that is my project in a nutshell.
Cool, thank you, Anne. All right, next up, Dianne Welsh.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dianne Welsh. I am the director of the entrepreneurship program, and I'm really excited about talking about our grant today. I'm going to speak about a couple of courses, actually. The first one I got a grant for was feasibility analysis, and what that course is about is taking ideas to opportunities. So everyone has a good idea. What we know is not everything is an opportunity. So we put students on teams in the class. It's required for all business majors and our entrepreneurship minor that's available to any student across campus. And so all the students take the class. It's sort of our background or sort of cornerstone of the program. And it's very important. So what we did is we realized that sustainability is a very important part of what students need to learn when they're building a business and taking that idea into an opportunity. And that sustainability component has to be worked in right away. The other course I'm going to talk about is, and that course number actually, if you're interested, is ENT BUS 300 feasibility analysis, and it's open to the campus. The second course is ENT BUS 206, and that is called, the new title of that course is Start Something Sustainable. And we actually have sustainability now in both titles. But that course is a 200 level course. So it's a beginner course. It's an elective. It's open to the whole campus. And what they do in that class is develop a sustainable business model. And that can be global. It can be built in the US. But it's the important part out of our outline is sustainability. And in the class, we present examples of sustainable business models that are there from different industries, different products and services. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dianne. So next, let's hear from Melanie.
Good morning, I'm Melanie Carrico. I teach in the apparel design concentration in the Department of Consumer Apparel and Retail Studies. And I'll be talking about the garment construction course that I teach every fall. It's our Studio 1 first level studio course, where the title of the project was integrating sustainability into a garment construction course. And we just did a few different ways of approaching garment construction, but talking more broadly about design in the course. So.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. I'm going to throw it to the last two panelists, Jinsu and Vidya Gargeya, because they actually worked on the same project together, and Anne and Melanie also had a hand in the project as well. So you guys chime in if you want.
Thank you, Dr. Hodges. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Jinsu, a faculty member in the Department of Consumer Apparel and Retail Studies. On behalf of my team members of this VF-funded teaching project, I'm happy to introduce our VF-funded teaching grant project. It's about applying a supply chain perspective to understand sustainability in cars, in consumer apparel retail studies. As the apparel industry is an ideal exemplifier of a global supply chain. So 4 professors from 2 different departments who cover classes in certain parts of the apparel supply chain worked together. And 4 professors include Dr. Gargeya from ISOM department, and Professor Carrico, Professor Wood, and me from the Consumer Apparel Retail Studies Department. So 4 of us work together, integrate sustainability components in each of our classes. So I'm going to talk about my classes. I incorporated relevant sustainability content in my classes, Advanced Retail Analysis class. Sustainability-related class activities include student reflection on their sustainability knowledge, especially apparel sustainability knowledge. And there are many class discussions about apparel sustainability, including apparel sustainable labels, fast fashion retailers, and luxury fashion retailers' sustainability initiatives. I have been very excited to read all the students' discussions, and very interesting discussion. And also in this spring semester, a new project on developing a business plan for a socially responsible fashion retailer was added in the class. And currently our students are in the final stage of finishing their paper, their posters, and also pitch videos. So I'm excited to see what their pitch videos look like. Thank you, Dr. Hodges. Thank you all.
Vidya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Vidya Gargeya. I'm a professor in Information Systems and Supply Chain Management Department. And it was an absolute pleasure and delight to work with my colleagues from the Consumer Apparel and Retail Studies on this project. Anne Wood, Melanie, Carrico, and Jin Su. And for many years, we were talking about sustainability in the operations management class. And this was an opportunity to integrate what was going on in apparel and textile industry into the operations course. So Melanie, Jin, and Anne taught me quite a bit. And we are also, Jin, Anne, and I, we are doing some research on sustainability in the apparel industry. So research combined with teaching was the exciting part of this endeavor. And also community engagement, because what we did was in one of the classes in the MBA program, we had a speaker, Mr. Eric Henry, who is the president and owner of TS Designs. And the same way, we introduced apparel and textile sustainability into the operations course by creating a mini case, which is clothing garbage, which is basically the amount of reuse and recyclability that takes place in apparel industry. And that was used for student learning outcomes. So it was an exciting journey from all fronts: community engagement, research, and as well as also more important, learning and teaching in the classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Gargeya.
Yeah.
Anne, Melanie, do you want to add anything about the project?
I'll just jump in and say that in my class, what we did was in my introduction to textile science, each week I incorporated sustainability elements to add to what they already had in terms of content. We've also updated our textile kit, which we have a new textile kit edition that has new sustainable fabrics. And I also added a weekly activity where the students can research a sustainable fabric of their choice. So, and also we brought in from the community a PowerPoint from Cotton Incorporated, from the head of their product development team, that I integrated into the class content as well. So we're trying to add as many aspects of sustainability to both levels of the textile class to help our students have a greater understanding of sustainability with regard to apparel and textiles.
And my class was the beginning level garment construction, so sort of prior to Studio One. And we got kind of sidelined by the hybridization of the course with COVID a little bit. My intent was to have some face-to-face interaction with guest speakers and so on, so there could be a little more hands-on component. So hopefully, maybe this time next year, we'll get to do it.
And I think actually, at least one of the speakers is going to be featured at the 2:00 session, Andrea from Gaia Conceptions. So, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Melanie, because we did have other funded teaching projects, through the Collaboratory, but a couple of them had to be put on hold because of the situation with COVID. So the projects that we're featuring today have been completed, even though some of it had to pivot a little bit. And I think we're hearing, yeah, there's a lot of the apparel element here, but I think the actual concepts that you all really focused on and sought to integrate really cut across. It doesn't really matter which industry in particular that we're talking about. Each of your projects touches on teaching and learning across different business courses and specific to sustainable business practices. So it's really actually pretty diverse topics that we're looking at. So with that being said, let's talk about some of the issues that kind of cut across your different projects. And this is a discussion, so feel free to raise your hand. I'm probably going to be able to see you, or just chime in. It's really very free. Vidya.
Yes, one of the exciting aspects about this project was in operations, we talk about inputs to outputs, converting of inputs into outputs. And what was interesting here was Melanie was doing more things connected with design in the apparel industry, that is the front end. And then Jinsu was doing more things which are supply chain and sourcing and those kinds of things. And Anne was doing more on the retailing and consumer side. So it was like I could integrate the three aspects into the operations course with an example from the apparel and textile industry. So that was the interesting part, that the three partners that I had and experts in their field helped me in that process.
That's a really good point. And what you brought to the table, what you brought to the project is your background in logistics and supply chain. So.
And ignorance in everything else. So
I don't think anybody's going to agree with you on that. Yeah. So I have a few questions that I'm going to just sort of throw out to the panelists, and let's just see where it takes us. Starting with, why is it important to integrate sustainability topics into business courses in general, and specifically the courses that you teach? I mean, frankly, business is not always looked at as kind of the torchbearers for sustainability, but I think that's changing. And what you all are doing by teaching business students sustainable problem solving skills is really going to help turn that tide. So why do you think it's important to integrate sustainability into your business courses? Vidya, I see your hand up.
Yes. Actually, I'm pleased to report that the Bryan School and UNC Greensboro in 2011, the Bryan School in particular, after Mac Banks came as the new dean, we introduced into the mission statement, we introduced ethics, global issues, innovation, and sustainability as the cornerstones of our mission statement. And that's a wonderful thing. So that being said, one of the reasons why we have to integrate is, yeah, we have taken it up as a mission and we have to accept it and integrate it into our courses. The second thing is planet, profit, and people issues are extremely important in the current day world. So I think we have been in the forefront of this for almost a decade. And I think we will be seeing more and more courses, not only the core courses, but also the electives, both at the undergraduate and the graduate levels, looking at sustainability. And the same thing, organizations and companies are doing the same thing. Thank you.
Okay. Dianne, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to follow what Vidya was saying, based on our mission and our vision for the Bryan School, back in about 2010, I put together a gen ed course at the freshman level on entrepreneurship and sustainability. And it has really been sought after. I mean, in all these years, and it was very obvious to me that sustainability is very student driven. And I think here in the Bryan School, we're very aware of what student needs are and what they're asking for. And so I was very excited and honored to be chosen as one of the recipients of the VF grant, because it was a way for us to take that sustainability component farther into the curriculum. So the two classes I brought up, business model, is just, hey, I got a great idea. What do you think? It's real basic. And we do a basic outline. Now sustainability is a major part of sort of a detailed outline the students put together from that business model. It's a major heading in it that they have to address. And that's at the 200 level, open to the whole campus. Then at the 300 level is the feasibility analysis I talked about, which is idea to opportunity. And the next step after feasibility is business plan. So the students actually take that class into the business plan class. So they have a year of a sustainable component in their business feasibility business plan. Most of what we know in business is that 60% of the businesses that don't do a feasibility analysis fail. So that very beginning part, idea to opportunity, is very important before they take it opportunity to action. Most entrepreneurs, or a lot of them, just say, oh, I know this is an opportunity. I'm just going to do the business plan and I know it's going to work. And that's why we see that failure rate. So what we're doing with our students here in the Bryan School is very important, and across campus, is to make sure they understand the importance of that sustainability component early on when they build the feasibility analysis, as well as the business model, which is the step before. They may be in that class, they may not. But in the feasibility analysis, they're going to carry through that for a whole year working on that project through the feasibility and business plan as a major component, because our future is obviously with sustainability. So thank you.
Thank you, Diane. I think you bring up a really good point about this idea of, being sort of born green, right? In some ways, or born sustainable, focused on issues that are important to sustainability more broadly. And that allows for flexibility and really a lot more innovation with regard to some of the issues, I would imagine. So I think I'm not surprised that it's popular among students, your sequence of courses. So Melanie, you have your hand up?
Well, for the product design side of things, the research shows that designers can be responsible for as much as 80% of the decisions related to the environmental and economic impact. And so that's why we have to start it early, but it crosses over into what Diane was just saying. You have to sort of build that in at the start. So, ideally, sustainability just becomes ingrained in everyone at some point, so that it's like, just breathing. I mean, that we don't have to, it's not a box we have to consciously tick, that it'll just be done. But that so much of it relies on that initial idea, and how you're going to implement it is important.
I would just add to that it's also important to think cradle to cradle, or not just, creating the product and getting it out into the marketplace, but the end of life as well. And sustainability plays into that very much. In fact, one of the fabrics that I have in the collection it's biodegradable synthetics. And so they actually promote cradle to cradle in this particular product. So as much education as we can give the student with the whole life cycle of the product, the better off we'll all be. Thank you.
That's an excellent point. Dr. Sue?
I would like to echo Professor Wood and Professor Carrico and Dr. Gargeya's perspectives. Yeah, and we as a team, we think that the courses are perfect courses to talk about sustainability, because consumer apparel retail studies, our students, they actually live with apparel sustainability, because every day when they open their closet, they choose the clothing they are going to dress for that day. So from that point of view, sustainability actually came into their mind, and the sustainability apparel products are so related to our students' everyday life, very relatable. And also the apparel products is actually complicated, not like it's very complicated. The supply chain is very long, complex. The suppliers wide across the globe. So the Bryan schools actually 4 missions: ethics, sustainability, globalization, innovation. Every mission relates to every courses of our course curriculum. So so that's the reason in this teaching project we emphasized using the supply chain perspectives. So we want our students to see the whole picture from the very beginning, suppliers to the very end, consumers. So students understand the interdependency of every segment of the apparel supply chain. So our students, not only the apparel consumers, they also need to understand, starting from the fibers, fabric, apparel manufacturing, and the retailing, merchandising. So every steps in this long, complex supply chain relates to sustainability, and a student can make contributions to apparel sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I think you made some really good points about, the applicability of sustainability, and I want to sort of segue that to the idea that sustainability is actually a really broad concept, right? So it encompasses so many things. I mean, we can be talking about environmental, we can be talking about corporate social responsibility, we can be talking about ethics, sort of morality driven approach to business. So given that, and given that it encompasses a lot of issues and topics, especially when it comes to teaching sustainability, what are some different ways to approach the topic that you all found to be successful by doing your projects? Anne?
Well, I'll just start by, with my lab, the first thing that I do is I give them a definition of sustainable development. And to Vidya's earlier point, I use the Elkington's 1997 triple bottom line of sustainability, and define that businesses look at sustainability in different ways, but the people, planet, and profit is kind of the trifecta of sustainable development. And then I have the students take different garments that they're interested in from the collection, and I have them research how the company positions themselves with regard to sustainability, because there's not a one size fits all. So it's important for them to see the scope. And so that's how we help get them there as far as research and looking at the different ways that companies define themselves with regard to sustainability. Thank you.
Vidya?
Okay, here I am. With regard to what goes on in the classroom, one of the topics we study is life cycle assessment. That is basically from somebody said, I think Anne said cradle to cradle. In fact, I liked what Eric Henry mentioned, dirt to shirt. So from cotton finally to making the shirt. So, and also that interesting concept that students should be incorporating into their daily thinking, particularly which goes back to what Melanie said with regard to design: reduce, reuse, and recycle. So first point of attack should be on reduction, reducing what we are using. Then we can think about reuse and recycle. Reduce. In fact, this morning I was mentioning to my wife, she said, oh, you must be having a busy day because you are heading home from home early. I said, yeah, I wish every one of us reduces the number of water bottles plastic water bottles we use. Okay, so that hopefully for our students, a takeaway is that reduction is important. Can I address a point which is in the chat? What are your thoughts on recycling fabrics? Before we get, with your permission, Nancy, since you are the coordinator.
Yeah, I think it's apropos, so go ahead.
Yeah. Is recycling fabrics. Yes, we have to recycle fabrics, and people are going to thrift stores and so on and so forth, and that should be encouraged. But more importantly, also start thinking about how many units are we buying, what is going on with our own usage, and how much that's right from the reduction stage. That's what my advice would be. Thank you.
Any other ideas about how you approach the topic that you think others could learn from, or that you might consider to be best practices? Melanie.
Thanks. I'm learning how to lower my hand and everything now. I went to the United Nations Environment Program report on design for sustainability to kind of pick out some things, and it's the cradle to cradle aspect that Anne and Vidya have mentioned was there, with just product lifetime and selecting like low impact materials and optimization of end of life systems, to use their wording. So that would be like designing a garment for disassembly or recyclability, or like Eric's dirt to shirt. If everything is cotton, technically it can go back to dirt, hopefully. So we talked about that with one of our garment assignments with a pant, a pull-on pant. If it's made out of all, let's say, cotton, and but you have to think stitched with cotton thread, and then a typical pull-on pant might have elastic. So if you don't want that elastic in there, do you do like a fabric drawstring that's all cotton again? And even then you have to think about the dyes. It's like, are they, if you're going to compost this material, for instance, when you're done with the pant, will the dyes be good for the earth? So there's a lot, like Jen said, there's a lot of parts to just a simple piece of apparel that you have to start thinking about. So thanks. That was a good framework for me, is to use those design for sustainability guidelines.
Thank you for sharing those, Melanie. And I think your example is an excellent one of how you're teaching students to be sustainable problem solvers. Product design, product development, it's about solving problems in some ways. Maybe the problem of being compostable, but also desirable to consumers. I mean, something they want to buy and wear. So, Dianne.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point and questions in the chat. I think what we've tried to do is be very hands-on, experiential. So for many years, I founded the Spartan Trader, which was a experiential learning lab where students, we actually took what came out of the dorms, bought it for 50 cents and resold it to students and the public at a really good price. And actually the CARS program was very active with their internships in having students work there and get hands-on experience. And so I think that was sort of a beginning thing that we were sort of ahead of our time here at UNCG with that store. And it's quite unique actually, but I find that students really want to contribute themselves in such a way. So what I try to do in the classes is have them go talk to someone in the business community about their idea. You know, maybe it's a similar business or somebody they can get ideas from. So, or, you know, for instance, some of the breweries here in town actually started making hand sanitizer. And so they did a pivot. So, and they, how did we recycle that plastic they were using and the glasses? And so really getting students hands-on experience, I think, is really what we're about at the Bryan School and what we try to portray in our courses. And I'm hearing that theme through all the speakers. And so in my classes, I really, both of them, I'm like, okay, let's get out of the classroom on this and let's get out there and see what everybody's doing. So thank you.
Yeah, I think those are some really good examples, especially the hand sanitizer pivoting in that way. And you know, we can also be talking about being sustainable in terms of, you know, staying viable as a small business when something like the COVID crisis happens. You know, back to the idea that sustainability is a very it's a huge concept. It can encompass a lot of different approaches, issues. Jen, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Dr. Hodges. And in my class, Advanced Retail Analysis, I give student activities they actually experience every day. For example, for the college age students, for example, the class discussion about the fast fashion and sustainability, and also the luxury fashion resale, and also the sustainable labels. So those type of things the student experience every day, and in every their apparel shopping trips. So they have a lot of say. And also another example is about Dr. Hodges just mentioned the COVID pandemic. So there's a discussion about how COVID pandemic impact fashion apparel retailer sustainability initiatives. A lot of good discussions. The student actually find out, oh yeah, actually it's related to apparel sustainability. The pandemic impacts apparel sustainability and also consumers. Now everybody now we live well with less. We contribute to sustainability. So they can find the real life examples from their everyday life. Thank you.
Great. Vidya, you have something to add?
Yes, I see a question or a comment in the chat box with regard to the intrinsic link between meat, dairy, and leather industries. And the aspect there is, and I've been trained as a chemical engineer, and I always think about products and byproducts, and what might come out of good as one thing may become bad somewhere else. So it is extremely important that we take an integrated view of everything that we do. It is difficult, Of course, thanks to Descartes, he wanted to simplify with linearity, but sometimes Descartes is wrong. We have to take the holistic approach. And in that case, that yes, with dairy and meat, consumptions don't come down, but then alternatives to leather are being produced. So what happens to the animal leather? So this is a concern, and that has to be thought through. So I think it's Justin Cornish who asked that question. Yes, it is important we as a society think through this more carefully in an integrated manner. In fact, I also see my good friend Joe Ganizer is in the audience. He will like this. I actually came up with, while there are 3 P's, there is also 3 T's, which is transportation, transparency, and trust. So these 3 things have also to be done because you want to reduce transportation, you want to increase transparency and trust among people that we are considering the holistic view. So enough on that. So maybe the next question I'll come back. Thank you.
So where's the book that you write that introduces the 3 T's? Is it in
I don't write books. Somebody else does. I just talk.
Well,
Sorry.
you should at least maybe put a copyright on that idea. It's a great idea, the 3 T's.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go back to something Dianne mentioned, which is that students are really engaged and want to get out and learn more. And we do that in the Bryan School. We focused on real world problems and getting out as much as we can out of the classroom into the real world. So I want to just kind of piggyback on that question, or that point, with the next question, which is, do you find that your students are interested in learning about sustainability, and in what ways?
Well, I can take, oh, go ahead, Anne. That's all right.
No, you go ahead. That's fine.
Okay. The students are, there's no question about it. They're teaching us in a lot of ways, and I learn from them. And I think that they're much more open to not take the regular channels of distribution. I'm thinking clothing wise, but if you look at Facebook Marketplace, where they're just recycling, everybody's recycling everything from switch plates that we turn on the wall, that back before we probably would have just thrown those in the garbage. Now we're recycling them, or getting some money out of them. Somebody else can use them. We give away. There's sites that are just giveaway sites. The students are very much, I think, interested. They see it as part of themselves, and they see that as their contribution to who they are and to their core being. And so it's not an extra thing they're learning in the classroom. It's really part of who they are. And I think that the more we can grasp that and embrace that throughout the curriculum, the better we are. And it's going to be all industries. And it's fascinating to learn from my colleagues on this panel what they're doing, because I'm just sitting here thinking about all the implications for entrepreneurship with this and what they're talking about. So.
Great. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of potential for further collaboration and new collaborations here, and finding out what people are interested in and seeing the overlap and potential is one of the reasons why we wanted to have this panel and the expo today. So Melanie, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, much like Dianne, my students very interested in sustainability. I asked in a discussion board during the last semester. You know, what comes to mind when you think about fashion sustainability, and more, do you dress yourself in a sustainable manner? And most of the students reported dressing sustainably by thrift shopping, reusing secondhand shopping, and upcycling some of the pieces. So that was insightful. I mean, I knew some of them did, of course, but just to the level, you know, that so many of them made me think, well, maybe I need to start thinking about an upcycling type of project. You know, can we work something like that in the future? And, you know, from a budget perspective, of course, if you're on a student income, thrift stores may be at your price point, but a lot of the fast fashion is just as cheap at times. But and some of the students reported, you know, like sometimes, yeah, I just have to go buy the cheap stuff if I need something. But there were others who were anti-fast fashion, which was good to hear. So, but yes, I think they're very, very interested in it all. Thanks.
I wanted to comment just with that, Pat, with Melanie. One thing my students are doing is side gigs. And the side gig is they're taking their clothes or their friends' clothes, and they've even approached me for some of my clothes, believe it or not. And I said, well, I doubt if I'm in your fashion sphere, but they're selling them on all these different websites. I'm just thinking of the clothing aspect, and they're making money on the side. So they have side gigs going. And they said, Dr. Welsh, do you have some extra lingerie, you know, stuff if you want any of that? And I'm like, you guys actually recycle lingerie? And they said, oh yeah, it's real popular. And there's certain sites for that, and swimming suits and all different kinds of clothing. And they're doing side gigs and they're making money on the side. And some of my students actually have 2 and 3 side gigs doing stuff in the recycle sort of space. I would call it in general in the recycle space. And, you know, and when you talk to them, you find these things out. So they're really looking for side gigs that encompass some of their own values.
That's a great example, and it makes me think of the fact that as part of the Sustainability Expo, we had wanted to have kind of a professional clothing swap opportunity for our students. And a couple of our student organizations were kind of taking the lead on that. The National Retail Federation Student Organization and Threads, both Bryan School student organizations. Unfortunately, because of the restrictions on in-person activities here on campus and just, you know, larger groups in general, we are going to be postponing that until the fall. But it will be a great way to do kind of what you're talking about, Dianne and Melanie, as far as, you know, students need professional dress, right, as they're getting ready to do their interviews for internships and the job market. And as it happens, we have some members of you know, alumni groups and our, you know, networks that due to COVID have sort of outgrown their professional clothing, maybe don't need it anymore, and so they're looking for a way to share it with students. And so be on the lookout for that. Hopefully, like I said, it'll be in the fall. So Vidya, your hand's up.
I was wanting to say something about the students' engagement in the classroom. They are extremely engaged, particularly if you look at it from the needs standpoint of food, shelter, and clothing. Of course, for the time being, shelter may not be, they have something in the form of living somewhere and all that is happening. but more on food and clothing, they are extremely interested because naturally that's what they are connected with. And one of the guest speakers I've invited over the years is Steve Tate, who is at Goat Lady Dairy. It's a dairy organization which is in Climax, North Carolina, and the kinds of sustainability efforts he's been putting into it. So I think we can certainly look at other industries, other not just apparel, but certainly other industries. And students are extremely interested in food and clothing. And if we can give more examples from that, they will like it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up food. I think, that ties into, sort of the scope of what we mean when we're talking about sustainability. But also, to your point about transparency, I think that's becoming extremely important to people, knowing where their food comes from, knowing where the products they buy come from.
One piece of trivia to get students engaged. Sorry, Nancy, I interrupted you.
Go ahead.
One piece of trivia anybody can ask in a class is, at your dinner table or breakfast table, what is the average distance any item on that table has traveled to get to your table? Average distance. And the answer, if people want to answer like a Jeopardy style question, what is 1,500 miles? And immediately they say, oh my God, 1,500 miles? Yes, that is true. That's all. Thank you.
That's definitely food for thought, no pun intended. All right, so that kind of leads to my next question, and I hope that each of you can, take a stab at it, because this is kind of, a big sort of key takeaway from this session. What are 2 to 3 things that you think are most important that students learn about sustainability? And I hear I'm specifically asking about business students, so Bryan School students.
I'll jump in on that one. So I have 3 thoughts. So I said, number one, when you enter the industry, you can make a difference with regard to sustainability. Even if it's a small change, you can make a difference. And number 2, sustainability is not one size fits all. There's a lot of different ways that you can go with sustainability, and it means a lot of different things. It could be giving back to your community. It could be creating a local supply chain, otherwise known as a fiber shed. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but it's not one size fits all. And then I think it's really important to have a framework to understand what sustainability is. And so, hopefully we can give our students this toolbox to understand sustainability as they go out into the industry and pursue their careers, and have this, as several people said, just have this kind of in their hearts that this is how they want to run their businesses, how they want to work for a business that is sustainable, and just have the toolkit in place before they get out into the industry.
Yeah, I like that idea of a toolkit, and it sort of helps to build a mindset, that is just really built on the whole, idea of sustainability, and bringing sustainability to bear on, whatever the topic, issue, problem, a task might be. Who else wants to share 2 to 3 things?
Well, I'll hop on.
Okay.
There's a lot of focus, of course, on the product and the materials and so on that we use, which is important, but sort of on a more like out of abstract level, I guess. I'm hoping that the students come away after their experience through our program with a great appreciation for the labor that is involved, and understanding how important it is to like treat the labor force fairly. You know, sometimes it takes many hours to construct a garment. And of course, things get more efficient in a factory, but still, you know, when they've put their considerable efforts into making these garments, I hope they come away with a strong appreciation for, you know, paying somebody their worth.
Excellent point. Jen?
Thank you, Dr. Hodges. And I thought about 2-3 things that are important for the students related to sustainability issues or topics. So students need to understand that most likely our students understand the sustainability from their own consumers' perspective. However, I think understanding sustainability from both manufacturer and consumers' perspective is important. So a lot of times the students think, oh, I think consumers consumers need. However, they need to realize sustainability is a collaboration among all different groups. So they need to understand the manufacturers' contributions, how to make the sustainable, for example, clothing relies on the manufacturers' efforts. And also, I hope our students can understand the need for long-term thinking. So it's a long-term thinking vision related to sustainability. Thank you.
It's a very good point. Vidya?
I seem to be on a roll with 3-letter acronyms, or not even acronyms, 3 letters. I have something to share with the students. They should go on a trip, TRIP. Of course, the T is, we talked about it, transportation, transparency, and trust. R is reduce, reuse, recycle. And I'll come to the I a little later because I just thought about it. P, of course, we know, profitability, people, and planet. The I is, if you innovate with integrity, the income will come.
You just came up with that now?
Yes, ma'am.
Congratulations. That's
My mind is going on overdrive. I don't know what's happening. Nancy, you are the cause of all this.
if you're not going to write a book, you need to trademark it.
No.
Trademark it. Own it before somebody else does.
What it doesn't matter. Let them get the income if they are innovative.
Dianne?
Vidya, I think that is definitely a title of a new article there. That's great. That's really great. I think for the students is that what we're bringing to them is realizing that companies are really trying to do the right thing nowadays, you know, a lot of them. And VF is a great example of that, in that when you're making a profit and you're a for-profit company, it's not as easy as it seems. And that maybe if we're using sustainable methods, I'll use clothing because almost everybody except Vidya and I are in that area, is that, you know, sustainable practices cost more, at least at this point in time. And that maybe as time moves on, that, you know, maybe that'll change. But right now, are we willing to make that sacrifice for sustainability, and that there's a cost in that? And I think as Bryan School students, you know, we talk a lot about profits and costs, and you know, that there is a connection between sometimes where we want to go and how we're getting there. And that it's just like when they get a college degree, it's not as easy as they first think it is when they start, right? And so I think making that connection is really important. And to ask, you know, are you an example to others? And how are we going to teach others about sustainability, family, friends? A lot of prior generations haven't had the knowledge base that these do coming out of school. You know, grandparents, parents, family members. So they have a role that they can actually teach others about it and bring that knowledge into their sphere. So thank you very much.
Excellent point. Thank you. Anybody else want to add anything more to that before we toss it to Maddie and the audience questions? Okay, so Maddie, what's a question that you think from the chat that you'd like us to address?
Sure. Ayana says, what are ways we can support sustainable clothing brands if finances prove to be an issue? Great question.
I will take that one on. And Vidya kind of mentioned it. It's thinking about maybe using less, buying less, and actually instead of buying, 10 fast fashion items that are low price, that aren't going to last for a long time, buy that one item that is really meaningful to you, that you want to take care of for a long period of time. So, how do we support sustainable brands? It's buying something that really means something, that is going to hold up, versus 5 things that are just going to end up in the landfill. So it's just being more considerate about your purchases. And I understand that sustainable apparel is a lot more expensive because they're paying a fair wage. They're using ethical factories. Some are LEED certified. These things cost more money. And I think, education is part of it, but valuing your possessions, kind of like Marie Kondo, is it sparking joy? And truly purchase only those things that spark joy, that you're going to care for and love over time.
Good.
Is there a good resource for knowing what kind of fabrics will stand up to wash and wear?
That's a great question. I mean, it's really hard to know. I mean, I think part of it is what we try to teach our students in our classes is about quality of fabrics and what constitutes quality. But it's learned over time too. It's not something that you can just immediately understand, but that's part of what we teach in our classes. We show them how quality is rated. We talk about things like pilling and yellowing and fading, and how things can last longer with certain either finishes or heavier weights being used. So that's some of the things that we actually explore in our classes. But it is learned over time. It's not that you can say, well, this fabric is going to hold up and this one isn't.
Well, and Maddie, from thrifting and just looking at your used secondhand clothes, sometimes you can get a sense of what's lasting, but there is this debate between using something like a cotton or an organic cotton versus your man-made materials. Like our vest that we made, which is reversible in class, we used a nylon, woven nylon, so it'll not fade when you're washing it. And like some of my garments that I love the most, that have lasted me the longest, are actually man-made materials, because I can wash a black nylon garment and it won't fade and so on. But then the other side of that is you get the little microplastic, shedding that comes from every wash. So there's not often, just the one magic answer for things. But you gotta, it's the balance, like Anne was saying, and hopefully just buying something that means something to you and lasts.
And I think to add to that and to address kind of maybe an aspect of what you're talking about, Maddie, a lot of people are working on ways to communicate the sustainability of a garment to the consumer. What would work best? Would an index work? Like, how sustainable is this garment? How fair was it in terms of its production? There are, kind of governmentally backed sort of, I guess, I can't think of the word really other than logo, but you have, for example, sorry?
Labeling, like the
Labeling.
organic label.
Yeah, like USDA organic, so that, but right now it's kind of a disparate situation as far as communicating clearly to the consumer, how sustainable is this garment that I'm looking to purchase. So hopefully in, a couple of years we'll be there.
Melanie brought up a point and a question that was brought up in the chat. Gavin says, with the increased use of recycled fibers, especially synthetic, the amount of microplastics have dramatically increased over time, negatively affecting many biospheres around the world. Does anyone have any thoughts on this issue, especially since many companies are now turning to recycled fibers?
My only thought is that, yes, that's definitely a problem that needs solving, isn't it? I think here in the US, we do have a tendency to wash things more than maybe we need to. So even just reducing the amount of washings could help. But I know there are like sort of mesh bag things that you can put your garments into, and then all the shedding happens within the bag. I don't have one personally. And that's supposed to keep it out of the water. But when you complicate laundry by having to put it in an extra bag, I don't know how many people are gonna bother with that.
Dianne Welsh wants to know where we find these bags.
I know I'll have to Google it, but I know I've seen them, or but I'll get you, Dianne. I'll find it for you.
I agree with Melanie that it's not an easy problem to solve, but there are also recycled fabrics like recycled cashmere, recycled wools. There are other things that are going on with regard to recycling that are not all adding to environmental concerns. So that's the good news. Patagonia has a whole line of recycled cashmeres and wools. So that's an exciting thing. So there are some good things going on as well.
Jeremy Bray brought up equity as far as the sustainability, the idea of buying sustainable items. What are some other ways that equity impacts sustainability?
Anybody want to tackle that one?
Not tackle, I will join Jeremy Bray on that. I won't go against him. On that issue, I fully concur. Having come from a country like India, that is important. we can talk about all that, yeah, pay more and do this and so on, but people cannot afford. And that's a true statement. And that is 60 to 70% of the world's population. So that has to be, that's why reduction is much better than thinking about other alternatives.
Jen?
Yes, I agree with Dr. Gargeya's point of view. Yeah, and actually from our another research VF funded project, we also found out something related to Dr. Bray's questions. And it is true that sustainable apparel, the price of sustainable products much higher than the regular alternative options products. This is a fact. However, this is a challenge of the sustainability issues in the apparel industry, because in order to make sustainable products, manufacturers actually invest a lot more in their facilities, their manufacturing equipment, and also they need to spend more on their laborers, improve working conditions, and also the sustainable distribution, sustainable merchandising, the whole process. So everything counts. So from manufacturer's perspective, they would like to change the mindset of consumers. So consumers need to realize there's cost associated with sustainable products. So it's a kind of communication between the manufacturers and consumers. So need the collaborative efforts.
Melanie?
You know, I agree with Jen, but I'm remembering years ago when organic produce, especially organic foods, were becoming much more prevalent in the stores, and I think Walmart started carrying some organics, and they were able to keep the prices more reasonable. And you know, a behemoth like Walmart can push a lot of initiatives to their vendors. So I think part of it can just be the consumer demanding it. You know, like I could see how if a Walmart demanded more sustainable practices from the folks who are producing their clothes, that they may still be able to keep the prices down, you know, for a more equitable alternative, you know. But there is that, you know, the consumer has to demand it.
Okay, we've got another question in the chat. What do you personally do to support sustainability outside of the classroom? Anything that you specifically do that might be unique?
I'll jump in on that one. I pretty much only now shop secondhand. In fact, my shirt is lovely secondhand. My pants are secondhand. I really, you know, because I realize, and I love fashion. I love buying stuff. I will be the first one to admit, being in a fashion department. But the reality is that there's just too many garments out there, and there's too many things going in the landfill. So I don't want to add to the problem. So I pretty much anything I buy now is either from Poshmark or from secondhand stores, because I don't want to add to the problem. I want to try to at least recycle as much as possible.
I buy locally, and so I go to the farmers market on Walker Avenue every Saturday, and there is a Fawcett Farms that is an organic local farm that's in Brown Summit, and we exclusively buy our food there, and we've really cut down on meat. And I feel much better because of that, because there's a lot of sustainability issues around that. And I'm from Iowa, so that's not like an easy thing for me to do. And now I really have a new excuse for my daughter, telling her that I am supporting sustainability because I reuse my clothes and wear them for so many years, and I buy better brands. And then I always buy classic most of the time. And my daughter's always, Mom, that's so old. And now I'm like, yeah, but I'm sustainable. So I'm in much better shape than I was at the beginning of this conversation.
Yes, I agree. First, personally, for me, I do slow fashion. So I make the best use, most use of my clothing. So slow fashion contribute to sustainability.
Well, and I, Vidya was talking about the distance to your table. Last night, our salad came from about 50 feet away from the table, at least the greens. So, we try to do that. We try to grow some vegetables and so on. But like the others, I shop a lot secondhand. So I hope I still have greens tonight after the frost from yesterday.
All
Those are
right.
some really good examples. I think we need to wind down because it's almost 10:15. We do have some questions that haven't been addressed. Maddie, is there any way that we can get some answers? I know one person asked about whether there's a list of sustainability courses that are offered in the Bryan School, and to share that. That's something we can definitely do.
Yeah, I think we can put together some follow-ups for each session and send it out to our registrants at the end.
Okay.
Really great questions, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them.
It's been a really, really fabulous panel. We're right at 10:15 Vidya, so I'm going to give you like 5 seconds.
Not necessary.
No,
5 seconds. All I wanted to say was some years ago when I was on the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, we formed a list of all the courses on equity, diversity and inclusion. We can do the same thing for sustainability across the whole campus.
It's a great idea. Yeah, we can definitely do that. So we've heard a lot of really great information from our panelists and grant recipients this morning. And I hope we can keep these conversations going, not just in the Bryan School, but across the university community. Lots of important issues talking about students and the teaching and learning of sustainability. So I really would like to thank all of the panelists for taking the time this morning to engage in this dialogue. I'd like, of course, to thank Maddie for organizing the show and helping with the Q&A, and Rob Owens, who's in the background for our technical support. I'd like to thank the VF Virtual Collaboratory Task Force, who helped kind of organize the whole grant proposal and review process, as well as the VF Corporation Foundation for providing us with the generous grant support. And of course, I would really like to thank all of our audience. Many of you are students and faculty. It's a very busy time, and we appreciate the fact that you pressed pause to join us today. I do hope that we'll see you back here in about 13 minutes for the next session. Starts at 10:30, and it's going to focus on the research projects that faculty have engaged in through the Collaboratory. So with that, I want to thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of your Earth Day.